Hey everybody out there, my name is DJ, and if you don't already know me, I lived in Russia for 7 years. Since I finished college in America and in Russia, I wanted to kind of just take a minute to talk about the differences and compare them a little bit, my experiences at least. I moved to Russia August 2010, and right when I got there, I started studying in the university there called Ural State University. I would say that my experience with college in Russia is very different from my experience with college in America, just for the fact that anything that has to do with documents or pretty much anything in Russia tends to be a little bit more difficult and time consuming and tedious than it is in America. For example, in America, when you're going to register at school, usually you just go on campus and they have booths and tables and everything set up for you. Everything's in one spot on one campus, so whether you need to go to the registrar's office to register or you need to go to the infirmary to get tests done or whatever it may be, at least from my experience in the universities that I went to in America, everything was in one spot, so you weren't having to go here and there and all over the place to do everything. In Russia, it's completely different. You get, well, for one, the university that I went to, there isn't necessarily a campus. And part of that is just because of the way that life is set up in Russia. They don't have these large campuses, at least not in the city that I lived in Yekaterinburg, Russia. They don't have these huge campuses where you have just student life. The universities in Yekaterinburg are just university buildings that are spread out throughout the city. And so, you know, your university building might be right next to other businesses or even next to apartment buildings and whatnot. You know, not necessarily next to dorms or next to the Business of Arts building or the science building like it is usually in America. So when I got there, we were given a list by the university of things that we needed to complete. Now granted, we didn't speak any Russian when we got there, and so thankfully we had student helpers that went around and took us to the different places. Shout out to Artie from Indonesia. You were a huge help. I don't know how we would have made it through without you helping us to go from place to place, because in Russia we had to go to the bank to pay fees, to pay for tuition, to pay for the dorm. Then we had to go to a completely separate building across the city to do a chest x-ray to make sure that you didn't have any problems going on in your lungs. Then we had to go to another doctor to get AIDS and HIV testing, because for foreigners they require that you get tested every 6 months, I believe, so every semester, to make sure that you're not bringing any kind of diseases or infections into the country. So that was another building that you had to go to, and when you go to get your blood drawn for the HIV testing, that's usually half a day process. You go to a building and there are tons of people already there. No matter what time you get there, there's already a line. Once you get there, you get a number, or you sign in or something. I can't even remember, even though I've done it so many times. But you pretty much just wait. You have to let the people at one section know that you're there, and you give them your paperwork and your passport, and then they call you in the order that you arrived. Once they call you, you have to go into one room and they ask you all these questions to, you know, ask personal questions about drug history, drug use, alcohol use, things of that nature, and really, you know, intimate questions that doctors ask when they're doing those types of testing. Then after you've done that, then you have to go into another room to get the blood drawn for the AIDS and HIV to be tested and whatnot. So that's one thing that you have to do, and then you have to pay for all of that. Then once you've done that, then you also have to go to your dorm, pay dorm fees there. You have to I don't even remember all the steps. It's been so many years since I did it all the first time. But I just remember it took days to get everything complete. Whereas in America, you have one day usually that you go to the campus and you get everything done. And it's usually a really quick thing. I feel like by lunchtime you're already in your dorm moving stuff in and you're ready, having a great day. Your parents can leave, la 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 la, everyone's happy. In Russia, it took us probably close to a week to get all the things done that we needed to do in order to start studying at the university. And so that was a huge difference. For me, I stayed in a dorm for the first year and a half that I lived in Russia. The dorm that I stayed in, it was half Russian students and the other half was foreigners. And so that was a really interesting dynamic. I think it was awesome for the fact that I was forced into that not forced into the situation, but forced to have to speak Russian because the common language was Russian, whether it was with the Russian students or the foreign students, because they were foreigners from all over the world, from Germany, from Indonesia, China, Korea, Italy, pretty much any place you can think of. This university had students from there. And some people spoke English, but a lot of people didn't, and so our common language was Russian. So that was really cool, and I think it helped me in the beginning of learning Russian to be put into a situation where I had to learn the language, because whether I was at home in the dorm, I had to speak Russian. Whether I was going to the grocery store to pick up milk or fruit, I had to speak Russian. If I wanted to go anywhere. Although there are a lot of people, well, I wouldn't even say, in Moscow there are tons of people that speak English, and you could probably get by your whole life without ever speaking Russian in Moscow. But in Yekaterinburg, it's not the same. There are a lot of people that speak English, but there are tons of people who don't speak English. And so if you want to be able to communicate and to fit into society, you need to know the language, you need to speak Russian. And for me that was really important. I didn't want to move to a country and not speak the language of the people. And I was going to the university and I was a student to learn Russian. I went to study Russian language, Russian linguistics. And so I had classes 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, various hours, but usually anywhere from 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning until 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And those classes consisted of reading, writing, listening classes, grammar, what else? Speaking, and then there were other ones, but those were the primary ones that we had to do. And so those were the classes that we had every day, and all the classes were in Russian. And so again, you were forced to speak and learn Russian. And the funniest thing is that it was really a humbling experience because I moved to Russia when I was 22, I think, 23. I'm really bad at math. Anywho, I was in my early 20s, and it was a humbling experience because a lot of my professors were younger than me. They were, 20, 21, and just starting to teach. But obviously they had the knowledge of the language and they had the knowledge of how to teach the language. And so I was learning from people who were younger than me, and part of learning a language is being okay with making mistakes, to be okay with looking like a child, looking like an idiot and making mistakes. And so anyone out there trying to learn a language, I would say, no matter how old you are, don't approach it in the sense of, oh, well, I'm an adult, so I have to look poised and, I don't want to look like a child or look stupid or make mistakes. Mistakes are what make you great. Mistakes are what help you to learn. So embrace the mistakes, be okay with making mistakes, because they help you. So huge shout out to all the professors that I had there. They were amazing, so good at their jobs. They were so patient with us. I can't imagine what it must be like to teach foreigners who are all from different countries, who all have different cultures, different life experiences, and try to teach them a language that none of them understand. And so kudos to you guys. You all are amazing. Wouldn't be here without you today, being able to speak Russian fluently. So I really appreciate that. I made some really great friends when I was a student in Russia, just because I, as I mentioned earlier, lived in a dorm for a year and a half, and we just, I would say, embraced each other's cultures. We would get together and have different culture nights, and so, you know, one night might be American night, where the Americans cook different cuisines from America, even though we don't really have anything indigenous to America, but whatever. And then another night might be Chinese night, where the Chinese students would make stuff for us. And then, you know, we'd have Japanese night, Korean night. And so it was really great just to experience all these different cultures and to be able to share life with them and experience the food and just the awesomeness of people from all over the world in different cultures coming together for one purpose, to learn Russian and further themselves for business or whatever their purpose was for learning Russian. Some interesting stories while in the dorm. I do remember my dorm where I lived. It was dorm number 6, and this dorm was situated literally right next to the building that I studied Russian in. So for me, that was a huge plus, because I could wake up literally 5 minutes before class and roll out of bed, put on some clothes real quick, and go to class. I do remember this one time that we had to evacuate because I don't know exactly what happened, but I think someone was cooking something on their floor of the dorm, and I don't know if it spilled or if there was an electric fire, but something happened. There was tons of smoke and a fire, and they had to evacuate the dorm. They evacuated the school building, got everybody out on the street. The firemen came and handled the situation. Nobody was hurt, so I mean, it was, thank God, a good situation where everybody was able to get out. Nobody was harmed. But I do remember that very vividly as our first, I guess, fire drill there. It wasn't a drill, it was the real deal. So that was interesting. The room that I had, actually, it was called the American room. And it's so embarrassing, because some of the rooms in the dorms had been renovated and were nicer and newer, whereas others were just old and in the same condition that they had probably been for 20 or 30 years. So I didn't realize this, because the room that they put me in, they didn't tell me that it was a special room, but apparently they wanted the Americans to feel comfortable and feel as close to what it's like to be in a dorm at home. And so they gave me the nicest, most renovated room. And I didn't realize it, because to me it was just a regular dorm room. You know, there's nothing special about it. Most dorm rooms in America are pretty boring, bland, nothing too special about them. And so this one, you know, had hardwood floor, a mattress from IKEA, some other furniture from IKEA, nothing special. Wasn't anything expensive or anything over the top crazy. It was just a plain room, but at least the stuff was, you know, nice and updated. It wasn't until I started making friends and going to other people's rooms that I realized, especially my Russian friends, that the treatment of those Russian students in a Russian university was worse than for the Americans, unfortunately. I guess because they were trying to impress Americans and get us to tell more Americans about it so that more Americans would go. They give us the best rooms, and then the poor Russian students were left with these horrible box spring mattresses. The beds, you know, weren't great. The rooms were dark and dank and just not, yeah. So after I found that out, I felt really bad, and it just, I don't know. It was yeah. But that's that. So anyways, that's a little bit about my experience as a student in Russia. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope this was interesting for you to hear about. I'll be making more videos about my experience in Russia, so please stay tuned. Have a great day, and make sure to smile. Deuces.